Over the many months of being in the fighting game community, Tekken has always been special to me since it was the very first game that really got me into the genre. Tekken hooked me right away from the start, with its complicated but satisfying gameplay, to its fun, well-written characters, and even the wacky but just as serious plot lines. Every aspect of this franchise is wonderfully crafted, and I can't praise these games enough. You know what else is something that is interesting and is just as, if not more complicated than fighting games? Psychology. Links between psychology and video games have already been studied by so many, both scholarly and non-scholarly. For example, there are so many well-written video essays out there outlining how psychology plays a factor in fighting games. So what am I, someone who isn't an expert at either of these fields, supposed to talk about? How about something simple and well-known, like the Vark learning model? For those of you that haven't come across Vark in school or need a recap in general, Vark is a learning style model that categorizes individuals into 4 modes of learning: visual, auditory, read/write, and kinesthetic. To keep this video from being way too long, I'll mainly be focusing my attention on how the kinesthetic learning models and the visual learning models impact the development of a Tekken player. Just know that the other models may function as an aid for players as well, such as audio cues can teach players how to react on time, and note-taking can actually help a player develop strategies and identify flaws in their gameplay. But before we delve further into how Vark can be an important tool for developing players, let's look at what makes Tekken so great and unique. Tekken is a traditional fighting game played in the 3rd dimension. Just like other traditional fighting games, your goal is to drop your opponent's life to 0. Most of the base mechanics throughout fighting games are somewhat universal, from combos, to counter hits, and even to whip punishes. Comprehensions of these mechanics are transferable throughout most of the genre. Then what makes Tekken so different from the rest? Simply said, it's the movement. Most traditional fighting games are 2D and played on an XY axis, meaning that there are only 4 directions that a player is able to move: up, down, left, and right. 3D fighters, on the other hand, have an added Z axis, making movement much more complicated than its 2D counterparts. Sidestepping is a fundamental mechanic to the Tekken franchise, and it can add extra layers in both offensive pressure and defensive tactics. Here's a quick demonstration. As you can see, my opponent is attempting to close the gap between us in order to make an attack and deal damage. I can utilize my sidestep as a way to A, create an opening for me to utilize a combo starter, which is known as a launcher in this game, or B, move out of the way in order to avoid my opponent's pressure. As you may realize, there isn't a lot of time for one to think before utilizing one of these strategies. Therefore, in order to react fast enough, we need to have a link between the visuals of what we see and the movements that we decide to implement. Now, the next step is to explain the goals of the Vark learning styles and how they might play a role in learning Tekken. The main purpose of Vark is to identify an individual's preferred method of learning. It's actually very likely that you've encountered these models before this video. As stated before, most likely in a school, since it's a popular learning device utilized in education. Before I move on to my side of the argument, I believe it is important to look at the criticisms of Vark, as it will give us a bigger scope of the discussion. A study was held at the Indiana University in order to disprove the myths about Vark. Students of an anatomy course were requested to take a Vark questionnaire at the start of the semester, and these responses were used in order to calculate the effectiveness of the different Vark components. According to Husmann and Dino Lawland, this experiment demonstrates that even those students who did utilize study strategies consistent with their Vark dominant categories had no greater success in the course. Their studies also indicate, while many students find the Vark test interesting, the undergraduate anatomy students in this research did not utilize the results from Vark to make changes in their study strategies. Through their studies, they claim that even if the students knew where their strengths were, they didn't do significantly better than the students that did not. Now that the information overload is out of the way, I'm here to disagree with people who hold actual PhDs. In all seriousness, their research can't just be brushed off to the side, and my purpose is to argue that the usage of the Vark learning model can be seen in a video game that I enjoy. I believe that the Vark model is not entirely useless, as it generalizes a basic understanding of efficient learning. Contrary to the claims held from the standard beliefs of learning psychology, Vark may be a useful tool for trying to understand the large pool of information provided in Tekken. Firstly, let's look at the visual aspect of Vark. Visual learning is defined by learning done through information shown in charts, graphs, and other symbols rather than words. Now, what aspect of fighting games provides important information with no words? Frame data. For those of you that are not familiar with the term, frame data is the inner workings of every move in a fighting game. Without going too in-depth into it, since I'm not an expert at it myself, frame data shows us the timing of every attack. Simply, if the chart shows that a move is negative, it means it's slow, and if the chart shows that a move is positive, it's fast. Let's take a look at Falkenraum's forward 1+2. On block, this move leaves Falkenraum in a minus state, meaning that I am unable to do anything after this move, which is also known as a frame disadvantage. If the move hits, however, it leaves me in a positive state, meaning that I am able to continue my own pressure. Learning how to read and understand frame data can be somewhat challenging since it's informationally dense. However, the difference between whether you win or lose a game could lie in whether or not you can understand frame advantages. Next up is kinesthetic learning. Kinesthetic learning is defined as the learning done through direct practice. Basically, anything that requires you to repeat certain actions is considered kinesthetic learning. This type of learning is probably the easiest to prove through Tekken, since everything in this game revolves around the player's ability to press buttons. For example, the Korean backdash is a movement option that allows you to cancel your backdash into a crouch, into another backdash, in order to force backwards movement faster than possible. On a fight stick, it looks something like this. And on a leverless controller, which is what I play on these days, it looks something like this. This movement tech requires very specific inputs and can take a while before you actually get the hang of it. I've been playing this game for over a year and even I still have trouble doing the Korean backdash. Learning all the different mechanics of Tekken can take years, however with consistent practice, anyone can master them. Also, it does help that all mechanics in this game are transferable throughout the franchise, so every new game that gets released, you don't have to relearn these mechanics. In the same article that I used for my definitions of the Vark learning model, the authors defined the visual preference as not including pictures, movies, and videos because he argued that these presentations also involve the other aspects of Vark. I wholeheartedly believe that the Vark learning model should not be viewed individually, but instead as a system that can help develop skills altogether. In the context of Tekken, whiff punishing is a term that means hitting someone when they have missed an attack. On whiff, most moves leave characters in a minus state, meaning that they are unable to move. The frame data gathered from the visual model and the mechanical skills that have been practiced from the kinesthetic model can be used as a guideline to make decisions in-game. The visual input of a character whiffing a move may cause your kinesthetic practices to kick in, allowing you to hit a punishing move. The Vark framework will be a topic of dispute for the many years to come. Some are for the usage of Vark in scholarly settings, while others believe that educators should be moving away from them as fast as possible. However, it's important to point out that the studies that disapprove the usage of Vark were conducted in an academic context. I'm not here to argue for or against the usage of Vark academically, nor do I have the authority to make such claims. Research exists that claim that the Vark learning model's utility comes from the ability to predict an individual's preferred style of learning. However, I won't be basing my entire claim on a study that is somewhat outdated. Instead, I would like to conclude on this note. Research shows that video games allow for learning styles that are different and unique in their own way. Video games are still relatively new, and we don't fully understand the impact that they can have on human learning. I believe that the usage of Vark should not be chained to an academic bubble, but instead should be explored in different contexts such as video games, sports, art, and music. This video was made in order to recontextualize the Vark learning styles into something that I personally love and enjoy, which was Tekken. I hope this video was able to make you reconsider the viability of the Vark learning styles, and if not, well, I hope it was at least an enjoyable watch. Thanks for watching.